We Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the abridged code of Jewish law, chapter 6, and we're up to number 2, to base, in chapter 6. And we're speaking about saying brachas, blessing Hashem for the various things that we do. All right, so number 2, base. When a person makes a blessing. Now, as we mentioned last week, there's 3 types of blessings. There's blessings of a mitzvah, like the blessing we make before we put on tefillin or like Shabbos candles. There's a blessing, birchas anenin. They're the blessings where we thank Hashem for the benefit we get from something. So for food, drink, nice smelling things. And then there's the blessings on praising Hashem. Right, so we have this different, but what we're saying now applies to all of them. So when we make any of these blessings, hey piv nokim and aroik, should have your mouth empty or free, clean of saliva. Now, obviously, you always have some moisture in your mouth. We certainly hope so. It's not healthy not to. But not what you would normally spit out. In other words, and also other things. So let's say you're still chewing on your bite of hot dog and you want to have a drink. So you have to make sure that you swallowed what you were eating before you make a blessing on the drink. Right? So you need to have an empty mouth. Shnamar. Why do we need to do this? Why do we need an empty mouth? What's so important? Okay, obviously, if your mouth is stuffed and you go, blah, 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 not going to understand the word you're saying, that's an inappropriate blessing. But you could have a little bit in your mouth. Why do we need an empty mouth? As it says, my mouth will be full of your praises. This is from Tillim. And you're learning about David HaMelech. This is one of the things that he wrote. So we see that when we praise Hashem, we say a blessing, our mouth should be full of praises. The mouth shouldn't have other things in it. Okay. Gimel, number 3. We are not allowed to say Hashem's name for no reason. So Hashem represents, the names of Hashem represents the different ways we perceive Hashem. And without getting too sidetracked, but just, it seems odd, in English, where there's one name for God, it seems odd that we have several names. So what it really refers to, the names refer to our perception of Hashem. So just to give a parable, the parable Chazal give us is that if there was a sun shining on one side of the wall, and the wall had stained glass windows, or several different colored windows, and the light goes through, so on either side of each window, the light looks reddish when it comes through the red window, and it looks green when it goes through the green window. Now, it's the same light force. It's just, it appears, if we perceive it differently based on the filter. So essentially, Hashem filters himself, for lack of a better word. Hashem filters himself that in order, because if you have pure godliness in the world, we would all cease to exist. It'd be like one ray of sun, even though on the earth, it's very powerful. And surely in the body of the sun itself, it's even more powerful. But in the body of the sun, you don't say, oh, there's that ray of sunlight. It becomes totally nullified. And you just say, there's the sun. You don't point to individual rays of light. They're not there. They cease to have any independent existence. And as powerful as the sun is more than a ray of sunlight, the infinite God is far more powerful than any creation, which is finite. So if there would be a revelation of pure godliness in this world, we'd all be blown away, so to speak, and we'd cease to exist and be like the ray of sunlight in the sun, body of the sun. So Hashem, so to speak, filters himself, and he doesn't really filter himself. And in the parable we give about the light, it actually really is filtered. It's not exactly the same because Hashem doesn't actually filter himself, but he gives the appearance. So Hashem, who sees the reality, there's no filter. But for us, it's we appear it's like our perception is changed. So therefore, for example, the name Elohim is how we perceive Hashem through the natural world, through the laws of nature. That's why it has the gematria. Each letter in the Hebrew alphabet has numerical value, and it's hateva, the nature, is the same gematria, same numerical value as Elohim. This is when you see this magnificent sunset. You have people go to the mountains and they feel in awe of the beauties of the Creator. I mean, the magnificent world. Only such a Creator. When you see the birth of a child, and you think about how two cells became this child, and you become overawed, and you realize there must be a Creator, and that's how we perceive Hashem name Elohim. Just as a side point, it's the name of God that's written in plural. And unfortunately, God forbid, the Christians and others have tried to use this against us in the past and talk about their Trinity and various things, and say, or their multiplicity of gods. And because they point to it, look, it's plural. It's plural, right? You even have the alien conspiracists, right? It was aliens, it's in plural. There's a whole team of them. God forbid, I feel funny saying it, but we're out in the world and people say these things to us. So they I'll be with you in a moment. So it's because it's in plural. The Kim is a plural, but why is it like that? Because when we perceive Hashem through the natural world, there's not only one way. One person gets inspired by a sunset, another person gets inspired by a baby being born, another person gets inspired by one thing on Tuesday and a different thing on Thursday, because there's multiple ways to connect in that experience. And therefore, it's also represented in the plural. Yeah, Ben.
Rabbi.
You can't say Shem Hashem or Shem Shamayim, but can you say Shem Elokecha?
So you could use the word Elokecha because we substituted the Hey, which makes his God name, for a Kuf.
Right. When you
so even when we say Elokim, right, that's really not Kim. There's a Hey there. We've and also there's a name of Hashem that's a Shin and a Dalit and a Yud, and when we're talking conversation we say Shakai.
Yeah.
Again, replacing the Dalit. So we do this in order to not actually say Hashem's name, but to make it close enough that we know what we're talking about. So when you write it, you can also write it with the Kuf.
Oh.
But to write the actual name,
you're allowed to use the Hey when you write it.
Yeah, if you actually wrote the name as it is meant to be, that's not a prohibition. The problem is what happens to that piece of paper.
Yeah.
So that piece of paper now has to go into Shemus, to Geniza, has to be buried. So that's why we avoid writing Hashem's name on paper, and we write something else. Even English, we'll write capital G-D. Right? So if that piece of paper, if it ends up in the garbage or on the floor or something, so the same thing, if you write Elohim, you write it with a kuf instead of the Hey. That same reason.
Can you write Shem Hashem?
Well, that's what the word Hashem means. Hashem means the name.
Right. The name.
Right. When we say Hashem, it's just a way of referring to the Almighty Creator.
The
we
first
say Hashem,
one,
which means the name, so we substitute the actual name for the word the name to avoid
right.
all these issues.
So, but the first time you're saying it for the name, and the second time you're saying it for Elokecha. When you say Shem Hashem.
Again, there's not an issue to write it. Just have to be careful. If you do write it,
yeah.
it's not advised to write it because it can create problems. Of course, if you're printing a siddur or writing a siddur, there's no problems being.
I'm talking about the essays that you're writing and so forth.
Yeah, it's just write the word Hashem or the name of Hashem. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, who else had a question? It's the phone number. I don't see the name.
What?
Someone else had a question on but it's a phone number, not a name.
Oh.
Was it Susan? I'm not sure. Who's here?
Me, Rabbi.
Yeah,
it's Susan Resnick, because I don't have internet.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine.
Computer.
I just wasn't sure.
I was gonna ask you something. It's pretty obvious why we can't have direct contact with Hashem, and how we have to pay respect in everything and be aware, because when Moses, he was changed after he had contact with Hashem, and God doesn't want that to happen to us. We're supposed to be his sheep, and I mean, I guess that's what I'm alluding to, the fact that if we can't be exposed to the infinite God, we can't. It's a destroying factor.
Right. So it's a little bit like if we modernize the example a little bit, and imagine you had a multi-million megawatt light bulb. So ironically, we'd all be blind because it would just blow apart our eyes, the vessel to see. So in order to be able to see, you have to cover over the light. So when there's enough light covered, you can see. So under certain circumstances, we can connect directly to Hashem, but only a filtered connection. Right? If we had this unfiltered, it'd be like blown away. Yeah, Mordechai, you have a question?
Yes. My Mechuta Mendy Horowitz, father Mayor Horowitz, passed away, and he and his family are coming in to stay with us for a few days. And my wife texted me a shopping list, and one of the things on there was she meant to write Dips, but instead she wrote Dios, which is God's name in Spanish. So I wonder if there's now a problem with our cell phones.
Well, text is not so much a problem. Most person say it's not a problem because it doesn't actually exist physically. I mean, it does to an extent, but if that was a slip of the hand when writing it, if it was actually written, that could be a problem. There was Gemara learned recently about someone who was meant to write Hashem's name. And instead, he thought he was meant to write Yehuda. But as he wrote it, he left out the Daled. So it ended up spelling Hashem's name. So it's in the Sefer Torah. So on the one hand, he can't erase it to read it. So it wasn't written with the intent to be Hashem's name, so it's no good. On the other hand, he can't erase it because physically it is Hashem's name. So he has to go over it again with ink, with the right intention. He has to rewrite it, go over the top. Right? So there's the intention and there's physically what's there. Yeah, so it's could be an issue. Okay. So Gimel. So we said number 3. We said that also we can't say one of Hashem's special names for no reason. And whoever does say Hashem's name for no reason has transgressed a positive mitzvah. So we don't have a negative saying you can't do that, but we have a positive. What's the positive? The Chsiva says it's Hashem Elokecha Tira. Hashem, your God. Often they translate the word tira as fear, but again, English and Hebrew don't match up exactly. And here it means you have to have an awe and a respect, like not just a regular respect, a respect that gives you a certain awe. And Sivan says, and if you don't pay attention, to show the proper respect to the name. So what happens, you can imagine, we know there's important people, let's say, Havdil to Hashem, obviously, but let's say you have in England, you have King Charles. Now, it's only a human king. It's not even really a king that has the full powers what a king used to do. But to a certain extent, he's an important person. So if you would walk up and say, how you going, Charlie? That would be disrespectful. There's an appropriate way to address, say Your Majesty or whatever happens to be, His Highness, whatever the correct protocol is. Because someone who's important, you don't just say their name. Lahavdil to this, when a person meets a Rebbe, for example, person speaks to the Rebbe in third person. You don't say, how are you? You say, how is the Rebbe? Or something like that. Because it's disrespectful to put on the same level, and say it's you, I, we're all the same. There's a certain protocol to speak to someone who is great. So if that's when one human to another human, how much more so a human to the infinite God? Just as a side point, don't want to get side, but King Charles, he did 1 year of high school in Australia.
Is he still king of Australia?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, so he went to high school 1 year, and he when he was doing the cross country run, someone overtook him, said, "Keep up, Princey." And he wrote about it, said it was the only year he was ever treated like a normal kid. Because he went to this boarding school in Australia. I guess, but not very respectful people. But anyway, we'll leave that aside. V'zeho miklal hayira, and this is part of having a respect and awe, shlahazkir shmoi gadol, not to say his great name. Ki im b'derech shevach avracha, unless you're saying it in a way of praise, in a way of blessing, then that's respectful. But just in conversation, just to throw it around, that's not respectful. So in a blessing in which you're obligated to say, or if it's in a way of learning. So if I was teaching a verse and I say the whole verse without interruption, I could say Hashem's name if it's in the verse, because it's a way of it's studying Hashem's Torah. The year of his daughter Avora b'shashu maski Hashem is Baruch Shemoy, and you should actually tremble. Person, I mean, he's talking about, if a person, and unfortunately none of us do it, but if we would actually really think and really feel that we're speaking to the infinite creator of all the universes, then when we would say Hashem's name, we would actually tremble. There'd be an incredible experience. Unfortunately, we've sort of just we say a lot of these things out of habit, but that should be what we aspire to. And you see many tzaddikim, it's how they were when they, Rabbi Levi Yitzchok Berditchev, he would literally
Rabbi?
like roll around on the floor. He would daven. He was
Rabbi.
Yeah.
Is it improper to say God bless you or God blesses you?
When someone sneezes, it could be. So you could just say bless you, and they all know who it is. That's one way to get around it. And when you want to give a blessing to someone, you say, "May Hashem bless you with whatever happens to be." And
but Hashem and God is the same word.
Well,
same
Hashem
name.
means the name. The literal translation of Hashem means the name. So it's a substitute for any of Hashem's names. So we don't actually say Hashem, it's one of Hashem's names, but it's a substitute that we all know what we're talking about, but without actually saying it. So that's what should happen. But not just to say it for no reason, not just to say Hashem's name for no reason. Now, when we say this, we're not only talking about the special name of a Yud, then a Hey, then a Vav, then a Hey, that special name of Hashem, but any name which is specifically for Hashem. So that's 7 names we have in Tanakh. Also, and it's not only in Hebrew, in the holy language, that we can't say Hashem's name, also, but we can't say it in any other language either for no reason. And if a person would curse another person, or even himself or herself, with one of Hashem's names, or with one of the, we're going to loosely translate it as nicknames of Hashem. They often translate as an allusion to Hashem, but Kinoim is like a nickname. And so, for example, let's say the Merciful One or the Almighty. So it's not actually one of Hashem's name, but we know what you mean. So
in Hebrew, you also say Elyon. In Yiddish, you say Eibishter.
Right, Eibishter, the one above.
Right.
right? So in the brackets here, it gives a whole list of Hebrew words that are nicknames for Hashem. So if you're familiar with the Hebrew, it means something, and if not, it's not. So we'll skip the brackets, but it might be something if you're familiar with Hebrew to have a look at it afterwards. So any of these b'chol loshen in any language. So such a person is chayev malchus. They get flogged. Now, when I said they get flogged, they don't really, because we don't have a Sanhedrin. But in concept, if there would be a Sanhedrin and they were warned beforehand, right, you have to have a warning beforehand, and you have to that stops people who are just getting carried away without thinking. They have to get warned, and there has to be witnesses to the person doing it. And again, as we said before, I just want to point out that the purposes of these punishments in the Torah is not to give them, right? Because it's someone who has to be warned first, and they have to do it reasonably. Can't do it the next day based on with a problem with that warning, because you forget the warning, but it has to be reasonably close time afterwards. So if someone gets warned and there's witnesses, well, they're not going to do it because no one wants to get executed or flogged or whatever happens to be. And so the point is and sometimes the consequence seems a little bit over the top. And whether it is or isn't, I'm not going to get into the spiritual ramifications of each one, but if one does feel it's over the top, that in itself is part of the point, because then no one's going to do it. And again, as we said, in Judaism, there's no secret police. There's no Inquisition and KGB trying to catch people not keeping the Torah. What a person does in the privacy of their own home without making it right, but that's between them and Hashem. But what this does is it stops all these things from being in the street. There's no desecration of Shabbos in public. There's no saying, cursing with Hashem's name in public. There's no eating non-kosher in public. All these things, they just leave. There's no alternative lifestyles in public. All these things leave the public domain. Again, what people do in the privacy of their own home, that's their business between them and Hashem. But they don't become normalized. And yes.
I guess this is in a way a little bit along the lines of Susan's question, but are you allowed to say, may God be with you, or God be with you, or you can't say that either?
I think it would be better to say Hashem. Or if you're writing it, put a capital G dash D.
There's a common expression.
We lost your sound. Say the last thing again.
That Jewish people use this all the time within the community, and they it's like saying Hashem be with you, but the word for Hashem is the Arabic translation for the word for God, which is Allah, which is our basically Aleph Lamed,
Means
So
Sekel.
I'm sorry.
I'm not sure which expression you're referring to, so I can't really.
It's a way of saying God be with you. They often say it.
Rabbi, someone says Allah ma'ak in
That's
Arabic.
that's the term I
What
want.
do they say?
Allah ma'ak. May God be with you.
Okay. I got to tell you honestly, I've never heard that one. Is that like an Israeli or a saying expression? Is it?
No, it's Arabic.
Arabic. Okay, so I guess it's
Used in I know for sure because we use it within the Sephardic or the Syrian community, even the Egyptian community.
Yes.
Okay. Look, if you see, it sounds like it might be best to avoid it, because if it's actually saying one of God's names, but I will say it like this: if it's a traditional greeting within a certain community or traditional blessing, and you also see the rabbinic leaders use it, then you can rely. If it's something this people do commonly, and therefore could be without sort of Torah approval, then just because it slipped into become the colloquial use, best to avoid it. But if it's something when the Sephardic community, Syrian community, and you see also the Torah leaders use it, so I guess it's a traditional. It's been accepted. But I haven't spent a lot of time in Syrian communities. Maybe I should. They don't have them here, and they don't have them in Australia. That's
Rabbi?
So, yes. So we can't hear your sound.
Moshe, we can't hear you.
We can't hear you.
Your sound is no.
Or you can send it in the chat, maybe. The question.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we hear. Yep.
Okay.
Now you
No, you're
don't.
doing it
Now it
again.
broke up again.
Which is very mercantile area.
We still can't hear you. Breaking up.
Can you hear me now? How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we hear.
Yes,
Yeah.
now it's better.
It's good for a minute, but that's
Yeah, then it goes again.
You keep on going in and out. Moshe.
Okay. How
Can you
about
type
now?
the question in the chat?
It's not that easy with this thing. This is an older phone. But anyway, there used to be a shoe salesman who used to say all the time, I don't want to say it, but in Yiddish, G/T. There's a letter missing. He used to say it. And he used to say, he used to say, and that he used to say that other word. Is that permitted also? I mean, I don't know.
No, see, they don't see. Even though it's correct with Yiddish, people say, I'm going to say because we're learning. People say Gott sei Dank and different things. It was all these different, but it was something that was frowned upon by rabbinic leadership.
Yeah.
So it's best to use something like Hashem, which avoids avoids all the issues. Okay, so we'll finish off the paragraph. We run out of time today.
Question.
So, yeah.
This relates.
So we lost the sound again.
I didn't hear the end of the earlier shiur, and is it true? Was Avshalom also the son of Hagit, as was Adonai? I mean, that was at the end of the other part of the shiur today, and I was not aware that Avshalom was the son of that lady, Hagit.
Yeah, so that's what Robert Smith said. So I'm sure he's researched it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was. Yeah.
Okay, let's squeeze and end this paragraph. And he says, Rabim, because of our many sins, for lack of a better word, sins really a Christian word, but our many faults. Rav Hamoine Am Eines Home, most people are not careful about this. But I'm in Ashkenaz, and they say in Yiddish, God Salim Trofen Kadoima, the Shem should punish him, right? They say this is a terrible thing. And with this, they are transgressing a negative prohibition of the Torah. So, what were we saying?
You mean it says strafen? It means punishing you.
Right, curse. You say it's right. We say God should punish him.
Yeah,
So they're cursing someone with Hashem's name,
right.
Someone they don't like, and ve'im kilo beloy shame, beloy kinoi, and even if someone curses another Jew without Hashem's name or without one of the nicknames, or shahaisa klola ba mikla davorim, or it's just an implied curse. Going on, for example, he says, "Kel yiploini baruch l'Hashem kadoima." He says, so that person not be blessed by Hashem. So he didn't wish anything bad, but it's implied curse. Even though he doesn't transgress technically to get flogged, a surah mika is still forbidden. Maybe we'll stop mid-paragraph because I know some people have things afterwards and I don't want to
Yeah.
go too over time. We'll continue tomorrow, God willing.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Rabbi.
Rabbi.
Promise. See you tomorrow. Have a wonderful afternoon. Take care.
Okay.